I moved to a quiet suburban neighborhood a few weeks ago. I thought it would be a nice escape from the chaos of city life. I was excited to set up my new home. I joined a big group of friendly neighbors. Everything felt calm and safe. I even bought a Ring camera to keep an eye on things. The first few nights were normal. I arranged my tech gear and enjoyed the peace. It was nice to feel quiet for a change. But my sense of tranquility didn't last long. On the third night, I decided to review the footage. At first, it seemed boring. I barely saw anything. Then I noticed a dark figure dart across my porch. I shook my head. Maybe it was a cat or a trick of the light. But even as I shrugged it off, a feeling settled in my stomach. Something felt off. As I kept watching, I saw more odd things. My trash can tipped over by itself one night. I sat on my couch, heart racing, trying to figure out what was happening. Was it a glitch? I wasn't sure, but something didn't sit right with me. Then came a night that changed everything. I woke up, the clock showing 3 a.m. I felt a chill. It was as if the room was too quiet. Grabbing my phone, I opened the Ring app. What I saw made my blood run cold. A figure stood at the edge of my yard, staring straight at my camera. I felt frozen, breath caught in my throat. I wanted to take a picture, but I fumbled and missed it. It vanished just like that. I went outside and looked around. The night was still and silent. I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. That night, I tossed and turned in bed. I knew something was out there, just beyond my walls. The next day, I talked to some neighbors. Everyone smiled and chatted, but no one reported anything strange. I felt like they thought I was crazy. I wanted to dismiss the events as my imagination. I knew technology, after all. But the dread only grew stronger. Then, one more night, it happened again. I glanced at the footage and saw it. A face, pale and gaunt. It looked into my camera like it was peering into my soul. My heart raced, and I reached for the remote. I was too late. The image was gone. At that moment, I understood. I wasn't alone. Something was out there, and it was watching me. I was shaking as I replayed the video, desperate for answers. Each time I looked, the unease grew. I needed to understand what was happening, but I didn't want to face the truth. I sat in my living room feeling hunted in my own home. The shadows outside whispered my name. I tried to sleep, but now I knew the truth. I was not safe. I was trapped in my own sanctuary, waiting for the unknown to come for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking, hungry for the dark. The next evening, I was restless. I paced the living room trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my bones. I knew I needed to figure out what was happening. Ignoring the fear gnawing at me, I decided to invite my neighbor Sarah over. She seemed friendly enough, and maybe she could help me make sense of everything. When she arrived, I tried to act casual. We chatted about the neighborhood, and I shared stories of moving in. But I couldn't ignore the itch in my mind. I wanted to ask her about the strange things I'd seen. But I hesitated. "Have you noticed anything weird around here?" I finally blurted out. Her smile faded as she searched my eyes. "Like what?" she asked, a hint of caution in her voice. I explained the dark figure and the strange happenings around my yard. As I spoke, I could see her stiffen. "I'm not sure what you mean, but I've heard some strange noises at night too," she admitted. Hope flickered. Maybe I wasn't losing my mind. I pressed her for details, but she seemed reluctant to share more. She made an excuse to leave soon after. I felt defeated, but at least I could count on the footage from my Ring camera. I told myself that maybe this time would be different. I opened the app, the screen lighting up my face in the dark room. I scanned the footage. Hours went by, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. When I finally decided to call it a night, the clock ticked toward midnight. As I reached to turn off the camera feed, something caught my eye. There it was again. A shadow flitting across the yard. My breath quickened as I rewound the video, heart pounding. I focused closely, and there it was, the same figure. Only this time, it lingered longer. Before I realized it, it slipped out of range, moving toward my front porch. I felt a prickling at the back of my neck. I couldn't shake the idea of it edging closer. I played the video frame by frame, desperate to see its face, but it always remained obscured. Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside. A crash. My heart raced. I jumped off the couch, heart pounding in my chest. I slowly moved toward the door, unsure of what I was about to find. Peering through the peephole, I squinted into the darkness. Nothing. The porch looked undisturbed. I opened the door a crack, just enough to listen. Nothing but the rustle of leaves in the cold night air. That's when I saw it. A shadow darting away along the side of my house. I felt paralyzed. I wanted to call for help, but my voice wouldn't come. Instead, I stepped out into the night, pulling my phone close. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I whispered, my voice barely breaking the stillness. Silence responded. My skin prickled as I scanned my surroundings. The shadows felt deeper, heavier. I took a step back, ready to retreat into the safety of my home. A sudden urge seized me to grab the camera and catch whatever I could. Then I froze, seeing a glint of light reflecting off something shiny in the grass. It was a small, worn-out locket. My stomach dropped as I picked it up. I opened it slowly, gasping at the sight inside. The faces stared back, both familiar yet menacing. I blinked, trying to understand. Who were they? I started to tremble, realizing that this discovery could change everything. I felt it then, a presence lurking just outside the reach of the light, as if the shadows themselves were alive, watching. "Who are you?" I called into the darkness. And in response, the silence deepened. I stood on the porch, the locket clutched tightly in my hand. The air was still and thick, like something was waiting. I was torn between curiosity and fear. In the back of my mind, a tiny voice urged me to go back inside, to lock the door, but I was rooted to the spot. Feeling a rush of adrenaline, I yelled again, "Show yourself!" My voice echoed back at me, but no answer came. I took a step forward, and the grass rustled underfoot as I moved cautiously toward the side of the house where I had seen the shadow. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around me like a wet blanket. I squinted into the blackness, hoping to see movement, to catch a glimpse of whatever was lurking. Then, as if summoned by my thoughts, I heard it. A faint whispering sound that seemed to come from all around me. It wasn't a word, but a chorus of voices, low and indistinct, like a distant conversation. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back, heart pounding. I turned on my phone flashlight, the beam slicing through the night. When the light hit the ground, I noticed something else, a trail of small footprints leading away from my porch. They were too small for an adult, and they didn't seem to belong to any animal I could recognize. "Is anyone there?" I shouted once more, hoping for a response. Instead, the whispering intensified for a brief moment before falling silent. I followed the trail with my flashlight, each step feeling heavier than the last. I was right at the edge of my yard when I heard the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open behind me. A chill ran down my spine. I turned quickly, heart racing, and saw it. Sarah was standing at her door, peering out into the darkness. She looked wide-eyed and anxious. "Did you hear that?" I asked, rushing back toward her. "I think something's out here." "There are stories," she said, glancing nervously at her own yard, "about the woods behind our houses." "What stories?" I pressed, feeling urgency. "Things that used to happen," she began but faltered, biting her lip as if she regretted saying anything at all. "Please, Sarah. I need to know," I urged, holding the locket tightly, the faces inside igniting a sense of dread. "Some say there are spirits." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Dark things take those who venture too far into the dark." My blood ran cold as the whispered voices crept back into my mind. Was that what I had heard? I started to question my own imagination, battling the fear that maybe I was losing my grip on reality. But the footprints, those were real. Before I could respond, a sudden gust of wind blew through, causing the trees to sway ominously. A loud crack echoed, and I looked up just in time to see a branch snap, falling dangerously close. "We need to go inside," I said, grabbing Sarah's arm. but she was looking past me, fear etched across her face. "No, wait! Something's there!" I turned and my breath caught in my throat. At the edge of the light stood that same shadow, watching with an intense stillness. I could feel its gaze piercing through me, and in that instant, I knew I had to know what it was. But just as I summoned the courage to take a step toward it, the lights flickered in my house and everything went dark. I stumbled backward, the dark swallowing the light from my phone. My pulse raced as I fumbled to turn the flashlight back on, fingers trembling. When the light flickered to life again, I quickly scanned the yard. The shadow was gone. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "See what?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the area where it had stood. My breath came in short bursts. "It was right here. I didn't want to be the only one who saw it," she said, glancing nervously around. "Something feels wrong." I nodded, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "We should go inside. Now." As we stepped back towards the porch, the whispering returned, weaving through the air, circling us like a predator. I could feel it crawling under my skin. I wanted to cover my ears, to block out the sound, but I couldn't. The whispers became clearer, sounds of children laughing mixed with soft cries. "Can you hear that?" I strained to ask Sarah, though it felt like a trap, the air thickening with unease. "Yeah. It sounds like—" She hesitated, eyes wide. Are they children?" I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. "It can't be. There are no kids out here this late." But even as I said it, I felt a deep chill. The weight of the night pressed down harder, an invisible force pushing me to stay put. "Let's go to the back door. We'll be closer to the house," I suggested, attempting to sound braver than I felt. I didn't want to show Sarah how freaked out I was. We crept across the lawn, the dark hulking around us, barely illuminated by the weak beam of my phone. As we reached the back door, it swung open, almost as if inviting us inside. I blinked, momentarily forgetting my fear, but a voice in my mind screamed to run. "Did you—" I began, but Sarah dashed ahead, slipping inside the house. I followed her quickly, slamming the door shut behind us. My heart was racing, and the whispers faded into a low hum, but they still lingered in the corners of my mind. We locked the door and turned toward the dimly lit kitchen. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, clutching her arms. "I don't know," I admitted, my pulse still racing. But there were footprints, small ones. It didn't feel like a natural night. She frowned, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "Just, there was something out there. We couldn't have imagined it." I swallowed hard, feeling reality slip further away. Just then, a strange sound broke the heaviness of silence. Something scraping against the walls of the house. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I rushed to the kitchen window and looked outside. My heart dropped. "No, no, no." "What is it?" Sarah asked, coming up behind me. "Footprints," I gasped, backing away from the glass. "There are more, and they're right at the wall." She stepped closer, her eyes widening. "How did they get here?" I didn't have an answer, but as I glanced back at the darkened yard, I knew the whispers were still out there. Something was creeping closer. I grabbed the locket from my pocket again, squeezing it tighter, hoping it would somehow protect me. "They're watching us," I said quietly, fear crawling back into my gut. That's when I heard it. Laughter, high-pitched and unhinged, echoing from the house. But it wasn't us making that sound. The laughter faded, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. I exchanged a panicked glance with Sarah. Her face was as pale as the moonlight spilling through the window. "What was that?" she breathed, still searching the shadows for answers. "I don't know, but we need to stay quiet," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt a pulse of adrenaline surge through me. This felt serious. We edged away from the kitchen window and pressed ourselves against the wall. I could almost feel the vibrations of the laughter reverberating in my head. My hands were clammy. The shadows seemed to thicken around us, swallowing the remaining light in the kitchen. "That door leads to the basement," I said, pointing to the door on the far side of the kitchen. I remembered Sarah saying they never used it, that it was too creepy, and the light down there was broken. "Do you think it could be—" She didn't finish the thought, but I knew what she meant. "That's our only way out if we have to get away from whatever's out there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The scraping sound returned, louder this time, dragging across the walls like nails on chalkboards. I swallowed hard, the knot in my stomach twisting tighter. "Let's get out of here," I urged. We crossed the kitchen silently, every step feeling like a slow-motion countdown. The moment I reached for the basement door, the laughter erupted again, echoing with an unnatural joy that made my skin crawl. Then, it stopped. We froze, hearts pounding. A moment of stillness stretched into an eternity. I glanced at Sarah, and her wide eyes told me she felt it too, the same survival instinct that screamed at me to run. But something inside compelled me to turn the doorknob. It creaked loudly and the sound seemed to bounce off the walls. The darkness beyond the door felt alive, as if it were drawing me in. I hesitated. "Wait," Sarah said, voice trembling. "What if it's worse down there? Better than whatever is out here," I insisted, pushing the door open wider. The stale air rushed past me, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something metallic. We stepped into the basement, and I fumbled to turn on my phone flashlight, illuminating the cramped space. Shadows darted along the walls, and I thought I saw something move in the corner of my eye. "Do you see that?" Sarah whispered, pointing to the far side of the basement. My heart raced as I followed her gaze. That's when I saw it. A dark corner where something small and shadowy shifted. Lines of its outline blurred as it seemed to almost blend into the darkness. I squinted, trying to make sense of the shape. "Is that a doll?" I asked, taking a cautious step forward. "It looks broken," Sarah replied, stepping closer to me, fear written across her face. As I approached the shape, clarity crept in. It was indeed a doll, its porcelain face cracked, one eye unblinking, as if watching us. But what sent chills down my spine were the tiny, familiar handprints smudged across its surface. "Those look like kids' marks," I gasped. Then everything went dark. The flashlight flickered and died. Desperate, I fumbled for it, a cold, creeping dread unfurling in the silence. In that complete darkness, whispers returned, louder and closer, wrapping around us until they smothered our thoughts. Panic rose in my chest as the darkness swallowed us. I swung my phone through the air, searching for the light button. My fingers trembled on the screen, and I almost dropped it as I finally managed to flick it back on. The beam shot forth, but the light was dimmer than before. "Where are you?" I whispered, my voice cracking. I held the phone out, trying to catch a glimpse of Sarah. She was just a few inches away, but it felt like miles. "I'm right here," she said, her voice shaky. "I can't see anything." I took a deep breath and stepped closer to her. A chill ran down my spine. The whispers had morphed into giggles, smothering our thoughts, each sound filled with a playful malice. It felt like they were toyed with us, drawing us in deeper. "Let's check that doll again," I suggested, my curiosity fighting against my fear. "It can't just be sitting there like that." We moved toward the corner, my heart pounding in sync with the echo of our footfalls. Each whisper seemed to ripple through the space, brushing against my ears as if they were taunting us. I turned the flashlight toward where the doll had been, but it was gone. "What? Where is it?" I gasped. My heart raced as I shone the light everywhere, but it only revealed creeping shadows that danced along the walls. "No, no, no," Sarah said, backing away. "I don't like this. We should leave." I nodded, an overwhelming sense of dread settling in my stomach. But before I could respond, the basement door slammed shut. The sound was sharp and final. The echo rang in the air, and we both jumped back against the wall, eyes wide as I fumbled with the door handle. "It won't open!" I shouted, panic creeping into my voice. A sudden draft swept through, chilling the air. Then I noticed it, an old wooden chair positioned oddly in the middle of the room facing the wall. It hadn't been there a moment ago. My heart sank as I pointed it out. "Why is that chair there?" I asked. Sarah stared at it, a mixture of confusion and fear plastered across her face. I don't know. This is too much. We need to find a way out. The whispers swelled to a crescendo, and the door rattled as if someone were trying to get in. The giggles returned, now laced with excitement, turning my blood cold. "Get back!" I shouted, instinctively stepping in front of Sarah. Before I could think, I rushed toward the chair. It felt as if I were compelled to do so, an unnatural force guiding my steps, despite the voice inside me screaming to flee. With each stride, the giggles grew louder, almost drowning out my racing heart. "Stop!" I yelled, throwing my phone against the chair in a desperate attempt to defuse whatever sinister force was at play. It hit the seat with a dull thud, and everything went silent in an instant, as if the world had shifted on its axis. Then I saw it. The doll. It was back, now sitting serenely on the chair, cracked porcelain face turned toward us, one eye still closed. A tremor ran through me, and I felt as if I were being watched. Every instinct screamed to run, but then I noticed something. Next to the doll, etched into the wood, were words I hadn't seen before. "Come play with us." My breath hitched. I demanded, "What do you want?" Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the darkness behind me. The energy shifted, and I could no longer tell if the threat was coming from the chair, the whispers, or the shadows behind us. Then something grabbed my ankle, icy and unyielding. I yanked my leg back, heart racing as the grip tightened, its coldness seeping through my jeans. I glanced down, expecting to see a hand or something worse, but there was nothing. Just empty air and the shadows shifting around us. "Did you see that?" I gasped, looking at Sarah. She shook her head, eyes wide and terrified. The laughter began again, echoing off the walls, a cruel reminder of our situation. "Get to the door!" I shouted, my voice sharp and urgent. We rushed toward the door, fear propelling us faster than ever. I threw my shoulder against it, but it didn't budge. The rattling sound from the other side grew again, more frantic now, as if whatever was outside wanted in even more than we wanted out. The chair loomed behind me, the doll watching with that empty, cracked eye. I stole a glance back at it, and for a split second it almost looked like its mouth moved, forming a silent giggle. My stomach twisted. Come on," I urged, pulling at the handle again. It felt hopeless as I pounded against it with my fists, fear rising with every thud. I turned back to Sarah, and she was frozen, just staring at the doll. "Sarah!" I yelled, snapping her back to reality. "We have to go." Suddenly, the whispers grew to a nearly unbearable volume, and the door jolted with a tremendous force. The sound made us both stumble back, glassy-eyed with shock. And then it hit me. Maybe the whispers were not just echoes of voices, but commands, beckoning us to stay. Just then, Sarah stumbled over something on the floor. I turned and saw a dust-covered book lying beside the chair. It looked ancient, with a cracked spine and yellowed pages. "What is that?" I asked, forgetting for a moment the terror that surrounded us. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the doll?" she said, hesitating. The whispers were still screaming around us, seeming to urge us to leave, but also to draw us in. I picked up the book, trying to concentrate despite the chaos around me. The cover was adorned with strange symbols. I opened it, and the pages were filled with drawings of dolls, each one more grotesque than the last. They all had one thing in common: small, unsettling smiles. "Look!" I pointed to one of the illustrations. It had the same features as the doll, but with sharp, jagged teeth. My stomach dropped. We weren't safe here. Whatever was happening in this basement was tied to that doll, and now it felt personal. Before I could think, a shadow flitted across the wall behind Sarah. My breath caught in my throat. "Behind you!" I shouted. She turned just in time to see the shadow grow larger, solidifying into a shape that loomed behind her. My heart raced in my chest as she turned to run. "We need to break the door," I yelled, but it felt like a futile thought as more whispers swirled around us, drowning out my words. Just then, the chair creaked. We both looked back, and the doll was gone again. It was not just eerie, it felt like a challenge. "Get ready," I said, clenching my fists. "We're getting out of here." As we spun toward the door, desperately pushing against it one more time, I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye. There, in the shadows, I could see a figure. That's when everything went dark. My eyes fluttered open, confusion wrapping around me like a heavy fog. I was sprawled on the cold floor of the basement, Sarah leaning over me, her face pale and frantic. "What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry and scratchy. I don't know. The shadows. They just swallowed us," she stammered, retreating slightly as I sat up. The air felt different now, thick and charged. The whispers faded, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. I looked around. The room was dimly lit, but I could see the corner where the chair had been. It was empty, and so was the space where the doll had watched us just moments before. "Where is it? Where's that doll?" I asked, my voice quaking. "I don't know. I didn't see anything after—" She trailed off, her eyes darting to the shadows. "But I felt it. Whatever was there, it's still here." I got to my feet, my legs shaky. The ground felt solid beneath me, but the eerie stillness was unsettling. I had to act. "We need to check the book again," I said, searching the floor for the dust-covered volume. It was still there, the pages slightly bent but intact. As I opened it again, my heart dropped. "Sarah, look at this," I said, pointing to a page showing a grotesque doll with familiar features. The drawing had dark, hollow eyes, and it seemed to be grinning wider than I remembered. "It's like it has a mind of its own." Suddenly, a creaking sound echoed from above us, followed by heavy footsteps. My heart raced again. "We're not alone," I muttered, glancing at Sarah. Her face had drained of color. "Is someone upstairs?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What do we do?" "Hide!" I hissed, looking for a place to squeeze into. The shadows seemed to thicken, pressing in around us as the footsteps grew louder. Someone, or something, was coming down. "Over here!" Sarah pointed to a dark corner. We crouched behind a stack of boxes, the dust dancing in the dim light. I held my breath, every instinct screaming that we needed to remain quiet. The footsteps stopped, and the door creaked open. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the light with a vague outline. I couldn't make out any features. The figure stepped inside, glancing around as if searching for us. "Did you hear that?" it said. The voice was deep, almost reverberating through the air. "You can't hide for long." A chill ran down my spine. I recognized that tone. It was the same whisper I had heard earlier, the same one that beckoned us to stay. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered, clutching my arm. I thought quickly. "I don't know if we can fight it, but we need to make a run for it. If we can get past it to the door." Before I could finish my thought, a loud crash came from the other side of the basement, and the figure turned sharply. "What was that?" it barked, seemingly distracted. "Now!" I urged, grabbing Sarah's hand and darting toward the opposite wall. My heart racing, I pushed against the door again, but it still didn't budge. Then I saw it. Peeking out from behind the shelf was the doll. That's when everything felt like it was unraveling. I stared at the doll in disbelief. It seemed to shine in the dim light, its sinister grin almost mocking us. My breath hitched as I felt a wave of dread wash over me. "We need to get out of here now," I said, pulling Sarah away from the boxes. But then the lights flickered above us, the basement filled with ominous whispers, rising and falling like a frenzied wave. "They're coming," the voice sounded, echoing off the walls. I couldn't tell if it was the figure or something worse. Sarah's eyes were wide, and she looked at me more terrified than ever. "What do we do?" she pleaded, her grip tightening on my arm. "We can't let that thing get us," I said, nodding towards the doll, which seemed to sway as if in rhythm with the murmurs. "If it's here, it means that whatever is behind those shadows knows we're here too." I led her away from the shelf, towards the basement stairs. The footsteps had returned, thudding heavily. Whoever, or whatever, was above us seemed more agitated. "We can't just stay here," I whispered urgently. As we rushed to the stairs, I suddenly remembered something from the book. "The way to stop it," I whispered to myself. "The page about the binding." I stopped, pulling Sarah back as I motioned to the book, still lying on the floor. We need to read it. Maybe there's something we can do. Are you insane? She hissed. We don't have time. But just then, a loud crash resonated above us, and I felt the floor tremble beneath my feet. No, we need to, I insisted, my heart pounding with urgency. I turned back to the book, frantically flipping pages. Where is it? I muttered, desperately scanning the text. I finally found the section. My finger traced the lines. To bring forth the light and bind the shadows. I grabbed the book and held it in front of us. We have to say this out loud. Now? Are you serious? Sarah's voice trembled as she looked toward the top of the stairs where shadows seemed to swirl dangerously close. Now, I said, my voice louder, more demanding. If there's even a chance it will help us. Before I could finish, the doll began to tremble on the shelf, its eyes locking with mine. The shadows thickened, creeping closer as if they had a mind of their own. You shouldn't have come here. A distorted voice hissed from the darkness, sending chills down my spine. In that moment, Sarah took a deep breath. Fine. What do we say? Repeat after me, I instructed, my voice shaking but firm. I recited the words aloud, knowing we had to try. By the light that guides our way. As we continued, the whispers grew louder, filling my head. We needed to finish the ritual, but I could feel something pressing down on us, something angry and relentless. The doll's grin widened, transforming into a sinister grimace. Faster! Sarah urged, fear lacing her voice. I pushed through the words as shadows surged around us. Then everything went dark. I woke up to the dim light of the basement spilling in through the open door. My head felt heavy, as if I'd been sleeping for days. As I rolled over, the first thing I noticed was that Sarah was no longer nearby. Panic surged through me, flooding my senses like cold water. Sarah! I called out, my voice echoing in the stillness. I sat up, glancing around the basement. The air felt different now, thick with something oppressive, something that didn't belong. I scrambled to my feet and stumbled toward the door, where a faint glow from the hallway called out to me like a beacon of hope. Sarah? I tried again, frantically scanning the room for any sign of her. Shadows clung to the corners, twisting into shapes that played tricks on my mind. I turned back to where the doll had been, and to my disbelief, it was gone. I hesitated, then stepped through the doorway and into the hall. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that drapes itself over you like a heavy blanket. My heart raced as I ventured further. Sarah? I called once more, my voice trembling. As I crept through the quiet house, I passed rooms filled with thick, oppressive shadows. Each step felt like a chase against some unknown force, urging me to move faster. I reached the living room, where sunlight poured in from the windows, illuminating the chaos that had erupted during the night. The furniture was overturned, cushions scattered across the floor, as if a storm had collided with the house. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just disarray. It felt like something had fought to claim this space. Sarah! I shouted, desperation fueling my voice. My pulse quickened. I thought of her face, pale and wide-eyed as she stared at the doll. I had to find her. I dashed down the hall to the front door and found it ajar, swinging slightly as though someone had recently fled. I pushed the door open, stepping outside into the sunlight, squinting against the brightness. But the air was still thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. I scanned the yard, half expecting to find her somewhere out there, perhaps leaning against a tree or lying still on the grass. But the backyard was empty. It felt wrong, like something was lingering in the edges of my perception. I turned around, ready to go back inside. But something caught my eye. A shadow flitting past the edge of the woods behind the house. My heart faltered. Could it be her? I hesitated for just a moment, then plunged toward the tree line, the woods dark and inviting. Sarah! I yelled, my voice echoing in the stillness. As I reached the tree line, the air seemed to grow colder. I felt the remnants of whispered giggles swirl around me, echoing like voices along the path. A shiver ran down my spine as I caught sight of movement deeper in the woods. Please, just show yourself, I pleaded, muscles tensed for a fight or flight. The shadows seemed to respond, thickening and swirling like clouds of smoke. The laughter echoed through the trees, growing louder and more raucous. There was something about it that sent chills far deeper than fear. It sent a message that this wasn't over. Then from beyond the trees, a figure emerged. It was Sarah standing just on the edge of the clearing. Relief flooded me, but it froze in my chest. She looked different, expression blank, eyes wide. "Sarah, are you okay?" I rushed towards her, but she didn't respond, just stood there as if stranded between life and something darker. "Sarah!" I drew closer, releasing a sharp breath as I reached out for her. The shadows seemed to pull back as I moved, yet they lingered, as if waiting for my next move. Suddenly, Sarah turned her head, fixing her gaze somewhere behind me, a look of fear etched across her face. The laughter compounded into a growing roar, rattling my bones. "We have to go, now!" I shouted, grabbing her hand. "Not yet," she said, her voice strangely detached. "They want us to stay." "No!" I yanked her, but her grip was firm, almost pulling me back into the abyss that surrounded us. "Their game isn't finished. We have to leave." But she didn't budge. "Do you want to play?" The shadows thickened. The very air around us felt charged, heavy with an unseen force. I could sense something swirling in the depths of those woods, something that wanted to pull us in, to keep us forever. I clutched the locket tightly, feeling its worn surface against my palm. A last vestige of realness in a world gone mad. "It's not safe here, we have to get out." "But they're waiting," Sarah murmured, her widely hopeful gaze turning hollow. My heart dropped as I pulled her into a furious embrace, breaking whatever spell had woven itself around her. "Stay with me!" I shouted into the swirling shadows. With one last desperate look at the looming trees suffocating our surroundings, I took her hand and ran. We barreled through the underbrush, scrambling back toward the sunlight. Behind us, the laughter grew louder, sharper, like a chorus of malicious children reveling in some twisted game. As we burst through the trees and into the open air, the shadows seemed to hesitate, then surged, a dark tide washing against the light. I could still hear that raucous laughter, fading into whispers. "I think we lost them," I gasped, panting in the sunlight. But the unease still crept in, a lingering reminder that whatever had haunted us, it wasn't truly gone. We turned to the house, knowing the details of that night would linger forever unanswered. The whispers, the shadows, and the tumultuous entities that danced just beyond our sight. Occasionally, when I glance back into those woods, I think I still hear that laughter. But I try not to dwell on it all too much, because as much as I want the questions answered, some mysteries are better left unsolved. I moved out of that neighborhood the following week. Whatever watched us from the woods seemed to know. I had never felt so unsettled or out of place. I am grateful to be free, but I still think about what truly happened that night. Had it been real? Or were we merely caught in a throes of fear and imagination? I guess sometimes not knowing keeps you alive.